everyone, I'm Captain Logan and welcome back to Read or We're All Gonna Die. Today's requested book comes from Joey Crouch, who asked me to review the first in the Star Trek Destiny trilogy. This is a book called Gods of Night. It's the first of three. It's written by David Mack and came out in 2008. This is a follow-up to a couple of Borg novels and kind of a big event trilogy that mixes a lot of characters and ships that are in various series that were coming out at the time, and it's kind of a lot of characters to keep up with. So it's a follow-up to that really bizarre Peter David book that I reviewed a few months ago called Before Dishonor, where the Borg destroy Pluto and all kinds of other really strange things happen, and Janeway becomes the Borg Queen, and it's insanely fanfic-ish, and it was kind of just Peter David trolling through a big event novel that this continuity was then stuck with and has to keep dealing with. So this is a lot more reined in than that, but it's following up from that, but there was also another Borg novel, and there might be more Borg things even in between that I'm not aware of, and I've not read all of this stuff. One of the things that made this book a little bit difficult for me to get into is all the things that I don't know, and I'd love to read some of the stuff in chronological order. I'm sure some of this I would have appreciated more if I was already familiar with some of these characters, because it's sort of like a big CW superhero crossover where you have all of these characters that are in the middle of various arcs and stories, and you'd appreciate it more. Like, you can dive into this. It does enough to keep the uninitiated moving along with it, but you'd appreciate certain character arcs and things, or I shouldn't even say character arcs, places that people are at in their arcs already, because this feels like smack dab in the middle of stuff. But you'd appreciate that more if you were already following some of these book series. You know, if I was already reading Titan and I was already reading, you know, the Star Trek Next Generation novels, etc. But anyway, so it's a follow-up to Before Dishonor, and there's also another book that was published just after that, just before this, in 08, like August of 08, I think, called, what is that book called? Resistance. And that's where Picard becomes Locutus again, and so he's reeling from those events, and he's very much in a first contact place right now, where he's really conflicted, and he hates the Borg, and he wants to destroy them, and he's feeling very revengey, but he's also trying not to lose his cool and lose his principles, and it feels like a battle between movie Picard and TV show Picard, which might be a lot of fun as this series continues down the road, but it's kind of just set up right now. So I will say, I found some of this book a little bit long and drawn out and tedious. I think it's stretching hard because it wants to be a trilogy, and I don't know that the material that's here is really enough for 400 pages, but as I started thinking about what actually happens in this, if I started telling you everything that happens in this book, it would sound like enough for a novel. But as I was reading it, I kept kind of waiting for more things to for the ball to get rolling on more things that it was setting up. And I think it's just because there are a lot of balls in the air, and a lot of it reads, one subplot in particular with Hernandez and the Columbia from Enterprise, 22nd Century, feels like a background material that you need in order to catch up and understand what's going on in the main story. But then when you get to the end, you find out that it is continuing things for at least one or two characters, even from that period. Not to give too much away, because I do want to recommend this to Star Trek fans that will find this interesting. It does read like a big, exciting event thing, and I will say I'm really interested and intrigued to go to the next book. I just hope things pick up at kind of a greater clip. But now that I know where it's going, I'm certainly more invested and more interested. But anyway, so I'll just talk a little bit about what's happening in this book and see if, and you can see if you're interested in taking a look at it. I am recommending this book to Star Trek fans that know each series pretty well. I think you'll be a little bit lost if you're not already pretty familiar with at least 24th century stuff. Again, being a big event thing, it tries to take all of the stuff the novels had been doing right then and make a big story out of it. And so it takes the... I want to say the Romulan War books had already started at this point, the Earth-Romulan War stuff in Enterprise, and it's even drawing that in and trying to figure out a way to connect it up to stuff that's happening with the Borg in the 24th century later. And you go through this book and you wonder how in the world those two things are going to end up converging, and there's clues and there's weird things going on with, like, transwarp drive and with an entire solar system that is an entire... Is it a solar system? Yeah, an entire solar system that's cloaked that the Borg seem to be using to get around, and nobody knows that they're in there, and that's connected to this, but we're not sure exactly how through most of the book. But anyway, so it's like 5 ships that we're following, 3 of them more than anything else. So, 2 major subplots. The Borg are back and destroying planets, and Picard's not sure if we can stop them, and he's starting to get pretty cynical about it, and Crusher is trying to help him to center himself and to refine his optimism, that kind of thing. I should mention that Picard and Crusher are married at this point, along with, of course, Troy and Ryker, who got married in Nemesis, but that's happened more recently, and Crusher has conceived a child that has not been born yet, and that is paralleled with Troy and Ryker, who tried to have another child. They had a miscarriage in another novel, and then they, at the beginning of this, just had another miscarriage, and so Troy is freaking out, and he is frankly just obnoxious and impossible to deal with. The Troy Ryker subplot, like, I want to sympathize with that, but she's just almost unlikable on purpose, it feels like. It's like having to read an entire book where Troy is acting like she did in The Loss, and I just don't like that. And if I wanted to add a second subtitle to this book, I would call it Old People Having Babies. I'm really distracted by how much time has passed before these people finally got their lives started. And so all this drama about these characters getting married finally and having children and all of that is not as effective, because I have to keep reminding myself, yeah, it's the 24th century, medicine is better, they probably can be in their 60s, mid-50s, early 60s, and have children. But I find that really distracting as I'm reading this, where it wants to be realistic, as realistic as possible, history of the future. We know the exact star dates. It's not like comics where characters go through a million bazillion things, and they don't age all that much in between. Like, we know exactly how old these characters are, and a lot of them are just now finally getting their lives started and having children and stuff. So when Picard in Generations says, I realize now that there are fewer years ahead of me than behind me, I question that, because stuff like this is trying to do regular things you do in a TV show if we had allowed it to get there. It's almost like we're playing catch-up now. Well, these are things you might have wanted to do in TNG, but we weren't allowed to do that, and we couldn't change status quo too much. So now that we can, it gets a little bit fanfic-ish in that way, where it's like, well, we'll just kind of ignore people's ages and let them do these kinds of things. And I wouldn't mind it if the drama were better and more interesting. I think the Picard stuff is better than the Ryker and Troy stuff. In some places, I feel like Mack is struggling to write Picard consistently, and in other places I feel like he's doing that on purpose, where again he's having that battle between TV show Picard and movie Picard, and maybe trying to turn that into an actual internal conflict instead of turning him into a totally different character than he was in the TV show to create forced drama, and so that he can want revenge and yell a lot and be, kind of irritating. So I'm kind of waiting to see where that goes before I cast a verdict on it. I don't immediately love that direction. The more my wife and I have talked about The First Contact, the more I've kind of come to agree with her that Picard seems a little bit out of character in that movie in wanting revenge on the Borg so hard, especially after where he comes down with Hugh in Iborg. That's talked about a little bit here, but I wish that kind of thing was brought up a little bit more. We do have a couple of conversations. This book is pretty plot driven. There's some okay character stuff and some okay character driven scenes here and there, but it is pretty plot heavy, and I feel like the human stuff is real few and far between. But there is a conversation about like, you know, committing genocide with the Borg again, like with Iborg. We do talk, you know, a little bit about the ethics of what we're doing with this, and that's good, but I think there could be more of it. It's Star Trek. I kind of wish we were talking about more of the, you know, making more of an ethical conundrum out of some of this. The real ethical conundrum stuff that's interesting happens more in the Hernandez stuff in the 22nd century. And so, like I said, this is split up into two main subplots that take place in two different time periods, and they will eventually pretty much converge. So you have Hernandez in the 22nd, so you have the Borg stuff in the future, and like I said, they're just straight up trying to murder us all now, and we're kind of just, it's a slow burn to a full all-out war that's about to start in the second book, and I keep waiting for that to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. It's a lot of skirmishes and a lot of posturing, and the Borg, you know, taking out planets, and us trying to figure out how exactly we're gonna handle it, but we haven't had like the full-scale conflict start yet. And then the stuff in the past is about Hernandez having a big battle with the Romulans, where at the, I guess, the beginning of the Earth-Romulan War. I'm fuzzy on whether or not the Earth-Romulan War has straight up started, or if this is kind of the beginning of it, part of the catalyst of it. But anyway, there's the Romulans ambush Hernandez and the Columbia, and there's a big fight, and it's a big battle in space, and then eventually it leads to Hernandez having to flee with her crew, and they end up with a time displacement problem where the place they can escape to will protect them and save them, but they're going to be... But because they've lost warp drive and they have to go at full impulse, they end up with a time displacement problem where it's going to be 12 years in the future when they've only traveled 4 months for the people on Earth. So if they went to Earth after that, it's kind of the Flight of the Navigator thing, where if they went to Earth after that, they would see all of their loved ones 12 years older. And then they end up finding the Kailiar accidentally, who, as I say, is this race that... or maybe I haven't mentioned this yet. The Kailiar are a race that don't want anybody to know anything about them. And they are pacifists, but they'll do whatever they have to stop other races from finding out about them. And so they are explorers, sort of like the Cytherians, where they don't get in ships and leave. They have other means. They're this extremely powerful race with incredible technology that allows them to, like, kind of cast out into the universe, and they can go fast enough that they could time travel if they wanted to, but they don't actually have to leave where they are. I'm not totally sure as to how exactly they're exploring, but they don't let anybody know about them, and they seem to me like a blend of a bunch of different races. So, like, they remind me of the Cytherians in that way, and then they're a lot like that race in Clues that from TNG, that episode where Data has to keep lying to Picard because Picard ordered him not to tell him about this race that is going to kill them if they find out that they actually met them. So they wiped their memories, but they couldn't wipe Data's. And that race was not pacifistic and was totally fine with just killing everyone on the ship to protect their secret. And this is like that race, except they're total pacifists. And in fact, they would, like the Halkins, they reminded me a little bit of the Halkins too, except that's not a super powerful godlike race like this is. But the Halkins from the beginning of Mirror Mirror, where they will kill themselves to prevent violence, and these guys are like that too. And in fact, that does, without giving too much away, end up happening where there are Kytherians. Now I'm mixing up race names, but these guys will at one point kill themselves to prevent humans from dying, because they preserve life at all costs. And they're also a little bit like the Organians in that they don't tolerate violence, and they won't let other people do violence to each other. So that's why Hernandez doesn't end up ever making it back to Earth. But without giving too much away, because I am recommending this book if you can get past the kind of dull, tedious stuff to get to the next one, which I want to assume is a little bit more exciting, because the premise is really interesting. I just want to get to the meat of it, and I don't feel like I'm quite there yet. But I don't want to give too much away in telling you what exactly happens with Hernandez and her crew. But it is really interesting, and I was really excited about it by the end. You got Esri Dax on the cover. She serves as kind of a plot device in this before she's anything, and maybe we'll do more with her in the next book. But she is, as I've talked about in other novel reviews, I guess I've done 4 or 5 of these now. She is the captain of the Avalon, which more and more I'm getting behind. More and more I'm starting to see Esri Dax as maybe Starship Captain material, as I have to keep reminding myself that as she's bonding more properly with the Dax symbiote, she's got more confidence and leadership skills, and she's able to really tap into the experiences of the symbiote. Because the reason she's kind of irritating in Season 7 DS9 when we introduce her is because she wasn't ready to join yet, and so she was inexperienced, and she was really immature, and it didn't really make sense to put her together yet. But they were in a big hurry to put the Dax symbiote somewhere, and so that kind of happened, and she wasn't sure that she even deserved it, and all of that. And so again, it was a little bit tedious dealing with her early on. I can see how she could be a really interesting character moving forward. But anyway, she's pretty much just here to go research the Columbia wreck, and there's a big mystery that happens there where people from her crew die as they're dealing with the Columbia wreck, and they're trying to figure out why exactly that is. And that takes too long. I think we live with them for far too long. So you have the Titan, with Ryker and Troy, who are both just really kind of insufferable in this book. I kind of don't like either of them here, which is really unfortunate, because it makes me kind of pause and not even be sure if I want to go back and read the Titan novels, which I've been told some of those are really, really good. But they get in each other's way so much here. It's a good argument for not being married to your commanding officer, or for your commanding officer not to be married to a member of his crew, because they both just seem like massive liabilities, both to each other and to the ship in this. There's a place where the doctor on that ship, and now I'm mixing up different characters on. Okay, so Simon Tarsi is I think, the doctor on the Avalon, and then they have a different doctor who I think is like a lizard-like guy. But, because again, a lot of these characters I'm not familiar with, so I'm having to mix together like characters I know really well that I have a visual reference for from the TV shows, and then I have characters that I have to create in my mind's eye a visual interpretation of that I'm not familiar with, and I can do that really well with like 1 or 2 or 3 new characters, but this is like 64, and it's just really hard to keep everybody together in my head. But anyway, so the doctor on the Titan has an opportunity to take Ryker or to take Troy out of commission for a while, which really should happen, and he doesn't take it, and that really bugs me. Like she should be relieved of duty. That was the term I was looking for, and. So the deal with her is, I'll just go through this real fast. The deal with her is she's had another miscarriage, and we come to find out that she has a rare condition that was passed down from her mother that is the reason that Lwaxana Troi in TNG, and I think her last appearance in that show, we found out had a miscarriage, and Troi almost had a sibling but didn't, and she buried that memory deep and didn't remember it later. But apparently, she repressed it. But apparently, that has passed down to Troi, and that's the reason that she and Ryker can't have children together. Well, through this entire story, Troi has an unborn child in her womb that is not viable, that she's in denial about and refuses to get rid of. And yeah, it's a really sad, unfortunate situation, and I want to sympathize with her, but she's just being completely unreasonable, and she's insisting that the fetus not be removed, and that she's gonna go through with the pregnancy even though it's not viable, and it's basically already dead, and it's almost certainly going to kill her if she has it. And what's annoying is, it's kind of consistent with stupid things she did in TNG. Like, I don't even want to say it's out of character for Troi, but this is one of those weird things where I need Picard to go back to TV show Picard, but I need Troi to go to movie Troi, because that character was more reasonable. Voyager Troi and movie Troi I could kind of get behind. We're back to, like, second or third season, or I don't know, I guess she's more annoying even in some places in fourth and fifth, but like this is like middle of TNG Troi, who's just really soap opera-esque and obnoxious, and I do not understand what she's doing here, and it keeps compromising Riker's command decisions, where Riker will not do things because he's afraid of how she's going to react, and he has to go home and deal with her at the end of the day. It's an absolute nightmare, especially for him, especially in the middle of going to war with the Borg. What are we doing? So anyway, so you have the Titan, and you have the Avalon, and you have the Enterprise, and you have Voyager really briefly, but you of course also have the Columbia. So you have four main ships that we keep going in between, and I think the two ships we spend the most time on are probably the Titan and the Columbia, until we get off the Columbia with an away mission that lasts forever. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, that literally kind of lasts forever. And then and then the Enterprise we spend some time on, the Avalon we spend some time on, and Voyager I think we really only jump over to for a split second to deal with to deal with Tom Paris finding out about, spoiler alert, I guess this is one big spoiler I'll give, the death of Admiral Paris. We kill off Admiral Paris in a Borg attack in this book, and that was a scene that I liked a lot, but I question drama things about Admiral Paris apparently being upset with his son, with Thomas, with Tom Paris for letting B'Elanna Torres leave him when she leaves him. Apparently, I'm assuming that happens in a Voyager novel I didn't read, but they also, there's a lot of parallels with characters that have issues with children and babies, and I want that to be an interesting thematic thing, but it kind of reads more like just drama for the sake of drama, so that so that we kind of have our allotment of human drama and personal stuff going on with characters, and it doesn't really, I guess loosely it connects up with the A story in that we are dealing with a lot of issues of mortality and also individuality. So I guess there's that, but it's a little superficial. It's not real thought-provoking drama or anything. Those connections aren't really thematically interesting to me. But anyway, like I said, premise-wise, I'm really interested in this. It feels like a Borg story that could actually go somewhere and not just be another typical annoying Borg story. I think it could wrap up way too easily, like we often do with the Borg, because they're so powerful now, we should not be able to beat them, which is very often the case. So we'll see how that goes. The Hernandez thing I'm very interested in, and the species that she finds is really, really interesting. So I am going to read the second book in this, and I will probably review that after I have read it. Originally, I was going to read these 3 books together and just talk about it all at once, but I got a request for it, so I thought I would go ahead and, so I just decided to go ahead and talk about it because I had a request for it, so I had to. But yeah, I had read the first half of this at one point, and I then got away from it and was looking at other things, and then I got this request, and I was going to go ahead and just read the rest of it, and it had been so long, I didn't remember enough about it, so I had to kind of start again and finish it. So anyway, I went ahead and read it from cover to cover again, but this is somewhat of a lukewarm recommendation for me. I want to assume that I'll be recommending this a lot harder once I have all of it. I liked this. It is a little slow for my taste, and it's not the easiest thing to just pick up with a lot of characters that you're not already familiar with. There are a lot of characters, like kind of minor characters from other TV shows that are really well integrated and kind of fun in this. Some of those just because they were already there. And staples of crews in other book series that I've not really looked at. I'm glad that I had some cursory knowledge of the continuity for this time in the book canon, because I think this would have been even tougher to read if I hadn't looked at Before Dishonor and if I hadn't looked at some Typhon Pact stuff and or stuff with the Typhon Pact in it. I think this is just pre-Typhon Pact. But anyway, so not impossible to pick up and read, but I wouldn't, if you've not looked at any of this stuff, but I wouldn't start here. I would dabble a little bit and maybe read some of Titan or some of the TNG novels, one or two of those right around here before you try to dive into this. Maybe one of each of the series that this is dealing with would be my recommendation. But anyway, I want to thank Joey Crouch for recommending this, and I will see you again next time, folks. Thanks a bunch for watching. Sure appreciate it.